I'm from the UK, and when I went to American university, I expected everything to work exactly the same as it does here. But after arriving, I discovered I was completely wrong. So in this video, I'm going to explain the 8 biggest differences between UK university and US college. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the structure of the degrees. In the UK, you specialise immediately. When people are doing their A-levels and GCSEs, they have an idea about whether they're going to do medicine, whether they're going to go study maths or economics or business at a certain university, and you apply for a specific course. And you only do classes to do with that subject when you're doing your degree. However, in the US, it's very broad and general initially. So in your first 1 or 2 years, you'll be doing lots of gen ed and elective classes, which could have nothing to do with your major. And another thing to note is that a lot of people don't even declare the major that they're going to do until 1 or 2 years into college. So they do the first couple of years of college without even knowing what they're going to study. So the next thing we're going to talk about is credits versus years. In the UK, the system is year-based. So you get a set timeline for your degree. Say you were going to do maths at Warwick University, you would go do 3 years and that was it. There's nothing you can do about it. That's how you graduate. And maybe if you fail a year, then you'd have to retake it, but you would just be retaking the first year. So it was still technically you'd be doing 3 years of content. And that's how you graduate UK university. And then you get a first or a 2-1 at the end of it. Usually, if you pass all your classes, which most people do, you study for 3 years, 4 years, and then you graduate from there. However, in the US, it's credit-based, so it works totally differently. They label each college as being 4 years, but that doesn't mean you have to be there for 4 years like it is in the UK. Lots of people at US college actually complete their graduation requirements early because they do all the credits that they need to do in order to graduate in a shorter time that's originally set out for them. Take me, for example. I was told I was going to study for 4 years at my US college, and then after arriving, I discovered that I could fulfill my credit requirement within about 2.5 years, saving me 1.5 years of college. That would not be possible in the UK, but it's just because the US is structured differently, and that's something you just have to get your head around if you're going to go to US college. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to explain is majors, minors, and electives, and obviously these terms don't really exist in the UK, but we're going to just take it as read that your major is the main thing you study. So if you're going to go study business or accounting or something else at university or maths, then that would be your major. So in the UK, your major is mostly fixed. Say you're studying maths, you have a certain amount of classes that you have to take in these 3 years, and sometimes you get options between this class or another class, but what you have to do is really mostly fixed in the timeline, and everybody does very similar things. You do have some electives that you can take, but most of the time they have to have something to do with your actual degree. In general, if you were to go to university in the UK, then your degree would mostly be fixed, and if you were to study maths, then you would mostly be doing maths classes. Whereas in contrast, in the US, your degree is mostly customizable. So the major that you choose is usually only about 1/3 of the classes that you actually do. And this is completely different to the UK. So the US degree is split up into 3 parts. You've got your major, you've got your gen ed, and you've got your electives. Your major requirements are the part of your degree that is actually the subject that you study and the subject that you graduate with on your certificate. You've got your electives, which don't have to have anything to do with your major whatsoever. They can be absolutely any class. You've just got to fulfill the empty credits. And then you've got gen eds, which are also very customizable. You've got a certain list of requirements set by your certain school, but there are certain classes that you can take to fulfill those requirements, and they're actually quite customizable. There's a lot to choose from, and it's not very fixed and set in stone. You get to choose a lot. So the next thing we're going to talk about is gen eds, or general education. This is a major part of US degrees, but actually it barely exists in the UK. I've never heard of people studying general education requirements at UK university. I'm sure it does exist in a very small part, but it barely exists in UK university. However, again, in contrast, approximately 1/3 of the degree in the US is usually general education requirement. Now, these requirements will be maths, English, business requirements, religious requirements. There'll be loads of them, but it depends on your school. So if you were to go to a religious school, then they would set general education requirements based on their values and their morals and what they want everybody to be learning. And these are actually really important because these are the classes that you can actually test out of a lot of the time, and they're the ones that are going to be least transferable to different schools. So, for example, if you were to be at a really religious school and they were to schedule you for their religious classes, then you were to move to a non-religious school, then those classes wouldn't count for anything. They would just transfer as open electives, which, yes, as we said, you do still need, but a lot of the time they won't be a problem. So another major difference between UK university and US college is the way you're assessed. So the way that you actually get your grade and get rewarded an A or a B or something like that. In the UK, it's very exam heavy. A lot of your grade will be based on big assignments or big exams at the end of the year. But again, in contrast, the US, yes, you do have exams, you have midterms and finals and sometimes an extra exam during a semester. But a lot of your grade will be based on things like quizzes and assignments and homework and attendance. So in the US, it's a continuous assessment. So every week, every class, every lesson, you're going to be assessed and it's going to go towards your final grade. So in the US, it's actually a point system. So you'll have quizzes, you'll have assignments, and they'll all be worth a certain number of points. And then it'll be a percentage of those points out of the overall points that were available for the class that will determine your grade at the end of the semester. So actually, in the US, all of these matter relatively equally. Whereas here, it's very exam heavy, and exams and big assignments matter much more than anything else. The next thing we're going to talk about here is flexibility of the degree. As we said earlier in the first point, the UK degree is very structured. If you're going to go to the UK to study a subject, you're going to be there for 3 or 4 years. You're going to be told at the start how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost, and you won't really be able to change that or accelerate that because it's not really that flexible whatsoever in the UK. And like I said, it's extremely structured. In the US degree, it's actually very flexible. You just have to fulfill your requirements and you can plan that in however way you want. There are a couple caveats to this, like prerequisites and other things, but really you have a lot of flexibility with how you want to plan your classes and how you want to structure your degree. And if you use some of the strategies that I've been talking about, then you'll be able to accelerate your degree and use this flexibility to your advantage. Also in America, you can switch majors halfway through your degree and you don't have to restart because a lot of your stuff is gen ed and electives, like I said. So that adds to the flexibility of the US degree. Unlike if you were to change majors in the UK, then you'd have to restart your entire degree. So I actually believe this is a massive positive and a massive benefit to US degrees. And like I said, you don't even have to declare a major until 1 or 2 years in, and that won't affect you really. Okay, so the next point we've already talked about quite a lot already, but graduation speed. So in the UK at university, graduation speed, as we said, is extremely fixed. People will have to retake years sometimes, but you get told how many years your degree is going to take you, and it's going to take you that long. And I think the most important thing to note here is that you can't really accelerate it. You can do it in a longer amount of time, but you can't really shorten the degree length. However, that's where it completely differs from the US, because in the US it's very flexible. Graduating early and graduating late is a very normal thing, and the 4 years is just kind of the default path that people set out for you. So the graduation timeline is actually very flexible. You don't even have to accelerate that much in order to graduate in, say, 3.5 years and lose 1 semester. That's actually a very common thing to do in the US, but it's something that people just going over there from the UK or Europe never understand before going. And it's something that international students never really get used to because we're so used to this fixed timeline and this mindset that you have to take a certain number of years to graduate. We're not used to this credit-based system that they have in the US. Okay, now the last point we're going to talk about is the overall philosophy that the UK and the US have about university. Now, I'm just going to be talking about 90% of the universities in the US that aren't Ivy League schools like Harvard or Yale, because obviously they'll be more similar to the more prestigious schools in the UK. But every school in the UK is specialization focused. You're studying a degree in order to specialize in a subject, in order to become an expert in that field. You go and study business to get really good at business, or you go and study medicine to become a doctor. In the US, they actually have a broader learning outlook on the whole thing. So university is less about specialization and preparing you for a specific subject, but it's actually more about preparing you for the world and preparing you to be an adult. So they care more about life philosophy and giving you morals and all of this stuff. Whereas in the UK, these things are kind of a secondary thought, but in the US, they're actually central to learning. So I hope this video helped explain some of the main differences between UK university and US college, and I hope you understand a bit more about how American university works and why it's important. So if you're planning on studying in America, already at US college, or just want to understand a bit more about how the system actually works, then make sure to subscribe and stay tuned with the channel, because I'm going to be posting many more videos just like this in the future, explaining everything that I wish I knew before starting my US degree. And if you want to learn exactly how I planned my degree, saved money, and structured everything in the US system, then I've put together a full resource called the US College Guide, where I break down everything into much more detail and tell you exactly how I got into the position that I'm in now. You can check out the US College Guide in the description below. Thank you very much for watching the US College Guide, and I'll see you in the next one.